Welcome to the Autism Advocate Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Hales. If you're looking for tips on how to advocate for and understand your autistic child in a more meaningful way, you've come to the right place, and we're so happy to have you join us. Hello there, welcome back. This is our deep dive today. It stems from a listener question, but again, a deep dive. I have this question a lot in one form or another. So let's talk about the process of beginning the IEP process, the diagnosis process. What do you do? How does it go? What do you expect? So this question is from Caitlin. My daughter is 4.5 years old and will start kindergarten in the fall of 2023. When do I start looking into schools and starting the IEP process? Where do I even begin? And let me tell you, I totally understand the feeling of where do I even begin? I was talking to a friend who has neurotypical children, and she was telling me it's so strange to me that it's not like you receive a diagnosis and then here's your streamlined resources, here's your next step, this is what you do. But often as parents, we're just kind of shoot out the door and it's like, well, see you in 6 months. We're just left to think there's no way that that's it. And unfortunately, I will say that you will find throughout your parenting journey that you are often met with, well, I guess that's just it. And you will find that there aren't as many resources available as you would hope. And you may find that, like myself, you are taking on, hopefully becoming one of those resources for other parents so that they can help their children and not have to flounder around as much as I did in the beginning. I will say there are two sort of beginnings. There's the diagnostic beginning, and then there is the integrating your child into a school setting beginning. So I'll begin with the diagnostic beginning. Now, receiving a diagnosis of autism or ADHD or any other developmental disability, neurological difference, can be had in different ways, just like any other diagnosis can. It can be that the individual themselves is expressing a lot of emotional or physical discomfort. It could be, probably in most cases, that you as the parent are noticing some red flags, and perhaps you're seeing things like, again, I will just name very typical signs, hand flapping, a lot of staring into the hand, maybe not quite responding to their name, not making a lot of eye contact, not a lot of babbling. They are hitting communication milestones a little late, perhaps also physical. Doesn't always have to be physical milestones. Often autistic children don't have any physical difficulties. Sometimes they do, but it's not directly linked to autism, at least from what I have seen of the data and my understandings. So in your diagnostic journey, you have seen enough red flags as a parent, or perhaps your pediatrician has recommended that they're seeing red flags, or another adult in their life has said, have you ever considered? And that can be a really tricky conversation. And I hope, however, you came to this place, that it's a good one that you're in, that you're able to give yourself grace for whatever feelings and emotions come up. There will be a lot of them. I did do a full episode about what to expect in the diagnostic process as far as emotionally for yourself as a parent and what you should and should not do. Now, again, that was emotionally, less logistically. This one I will focus more on logistically. Logistically, you seek out your pediatrician. If it were me, if I could go back in time, and honestly, what I did was I sought out the resources. So there wasn't somebody, I didn't wait until it was time to see the pediatrician again. I called and made appointments and brought up my concerns. A lot of times, pediatricians, especially with younger kids, they have people, from what it seems to me, requesting and having concerns about autism, ADHD, etc. more frequently, because more community members are aware of the signs and want to be able to help their children. And I suppose that creates an understandable sort of resistance from doctors, pediatricians, and therapists for pursuing a diagnosis process. Um, it's kind of the boy who cried wolf. Everyone's saying, I'm worried my kid's autistic, and maybe only 1 out of every 10 is actually going to be autistic. So I can understand sort of the tolerance that providers build up. I will say I'm not a provider. I am not trying to teach or advocate on behalf of providers. Mine is for the parents and the children. So in that case, I will say, if they do not take you seriously, if they appear dismissive, even if it's very kindly that they put you off, if you have questions, pursue finding out further information. Now, I don't say pursue a diagnosis. You're not trying to seek out something that doesn't exist or isn't part of your child's truth and identity. But if your child is autistic, if your child is autistic, you will want to know. Your pediatrician, your doctor, while they are an expert on medically children, they are not an expert on your child, meaning you see your child every day, all day. You have probably taken time to observe other children and see them in some of the same environments that has had enough concerns for you to have this thought process. Pursue it, pursue it, pursue it. The more information you have, the more specifically you can help your child grow and develop and learn skills to help them. It will help you feel like you are more equipped to help your child. You will approach them in a much more understanding way. You will understand the difference between a disciplining and a teaching moment. And by disciplining, discipline means teaching, but by disciplining, I mean more consequences than a teaching moment. And you'll just be so much more prepared. It will go so much more smoother. The sooner you get that information, the better. So please do not let doctors deter you from seeing someone outside, continuing on the process. Now, if you go to a behavioral psychologist, psychiatrist, whoever that would be appropriate to diagnose or not diagnose your child, and they go through the process and then the answer is no, that's something different to consider. But go beyond the pediatrician is my advice. Now, again, I'm just a parent. I'm not like a medical professional myself. This is just what I would tell my good friend who has concerns about their child. Okay, so once you go past the pediatrician, you make several appointments. I would urge you to cancel whatever you need to cancel to get those appointments made. Often there is an outrageous wait list for any kinds of services for autistic children. And this is for not just autistic children, but behavioral health. So whether it's therapies, etc. So you have to consider that each part comes with its own wait list. So for example, getting a pediatrician sometimes comes with the child when they are born. If you're like me and you moved from a different country and you have to get a pediatrician, we had to wait about 2 months for that pediatrician. Once we got in with that pediatrician, we had to get a referral from that pediatrician to different therapies. The wait list for those therapy places was anywhere from 6 months to a year. Here we are a year later, and we just got into the behavioral health area of the specific hospital that we were hoping to receive more services and help with managing medication. So something very serious that we can't just do elsewhere. A full year. So if you're just putting it off to hopefully one day just, casually pick up pursuing the diagnosis, I caution you, it would be so much easier to get on those wait lists before things are in a real struggle. To get on those wait lists, to get your kids the help, because by the time you feel you really need it and your child really needs it, and then you begin this process where each step of the process has maybe a 3 month to a year wait list, you are talking about 2 years or so for it to take you to get your child a diagnosis, and then also get your child the accompanying therapies that you would like to give to your child and that your psychiatrist, your behavioral therapist recommends. So please consider the lengthy process involved that you don't have much control over. Start now. The other thing that I will say is you have a bunch of choices as far as therapies. You have occupational therapy, that's more for physical motion and movement. It's also for sensory integration, meaning that many autistic children struggle with sensory levels, that they are either diminished or exaggerated. Their sense of smell is diminished or exaggerated. Same with hearing or sight, tactile or feeling, taste, I think that's all my senses. But all of those things are exaggerated. They also may struggle with proprioception, which is your body's ability to read signals from its own organs. For example, when you're hungry, when you are tired, when you're physically hot or cold, changes in temperature, when you're feeling like a headache, or when you're feeling other physical things, again, within your body, you can struggle to realize that you need to use the restroom. How helpful would it be if you knew that before starting the potty training process, for example, that your child can literally not feel and does not receive the signal from their bladder to their brain that they need to urinate now, until it's too late and it's coming out. The kind of compassionate, helpful response that you could work with your child in that respect, rather than thinking that they are being defiant or lazy and that they're just distracted. It makes such a difference. So it can help with sensory integration, appropriate interoception. It can also help with a lot of sometimes fine motor skills children can struggle with, and large motor skills. So I don't think large motor skills, I don't think that's the word, but fine motor skills, which means like handwriting or pinching or grasping. It doesn't have to be just hands, but doing things in a very particular, specific way, versus large motor skills, which would be like running, jumping, skipping, standing on one foot, things like that. A lot of those things can accompany autism and can help your child communicate more effectively, have more control over their body, have less physical accidents. Maybe they're tripping less often. Maybe they have poor balance and coordination. Can help a lot with those kinds of things. Also, the sensory needs of autistic children can be different because of their sensory profile, meaning that they can hear things louder or quieter. Sometimes their body needs that vestibular stimulation, which means it has to do with pressure or balance, and that's what a rocking stim would do or a spinning stim would do. It's a vestibular regulation. And OT therapy, occupational therapy, can help a parent and help a child satisfy those needs, and also investigate what kind of sensory needs your child does have. I know it can be really tricky, and a lot of times occupational therapists and therapy facilities can have more resources at your disposal, where maybe a weighted vest, you can try it before you buy it. Maybe you have the opportunity to try a weighted vest and you realize this is the relief that your child really needs. But half the time, more than that, if you're my family, 9 times out of 10, I think this could really do it. This product I see online, I buy it for them, not effective, right? I don't know how much money we have wasted trying to figure out what could work. Occupational therapy is a wonderful place to help you, the therapist, and your child find things that work physically in a sensory sense to help meet your child's needs. Apart from occupational therapy, there's speech therapy. Often communication and socialization are a struggle for autistic children and often autistic adults. Social norms and social constructs that we have developed as a society, wherever you happen to live, whether the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, all those kinds of places have different social constructs, which is why I say Speech and understanding social constructs is different in every country that has a different culture. Even in different places within every country has a different culture. For example, in Korea and Japan, where I have lived both, you bow upon greeting and to show respect, and it is very typical to do and considered a great sign of disrespect if you don't. Um, American culture, absolutely not. That's not something you do. And so those are both social constructs where in America you're more likely to shake hands or to give a high five than you are to bow. And when you pull those kind of social constructs apart, they're quite strange. They don't make a lot of sense. And when you take away some of the natural inclination our brains, as neurotypical people, our brains seem to have to pick up on those social cues and to learn them. Many of my autistic friends and my autistic children struggle with that part that just kind of picks it up. Like, you probably don't remember a time where you really specifically learned your native language, or you specifically learned to walk. There was something about being the human you are that drives you innately to learn how to do those things for survival. Now, socially, many of my autistic friends just don't have that part, or it's just different. It's skewed. And so that can be a really big struggle and a very valid struggle. So in speech therapy, you can work on all sorts of things, but social communication, in other words, reading feelings and emotions, turn taking, what may be offensive or not offensive to someone to say, the meanings of words or new vocabulary, identifying vocabulary. You can also learn a lot of pronunciation techniques. If someone has a speech impediment or they're not speaking quite clearly, you can address tongue ties, which is this string. I never remember what it's called, but sometimes people have one that's shorter. Oftentimes, speech therapy revolves around not speech. It's just a way of communication. So perhaps we're integrating sign language if that is the preferred communication method of your autistic child. Perhaps they're using an AAC device. If you're not sure what that is, it's the several apps that are on tablets or now also on phones where it's used as a communication board, and there are small pictures that help depict and help those that require it build sentences and help them communicate their needs, wants, and thoughts, which is fantastic. We are trying to allow people to communicate in a way that best serves them. Because I don't know about you, but anytime I have tried to communicate in a learned foreign language, like Korean, for example, it's nowhere near as well spoken. It's nowhere near as accurate as what I'm trying to say. I can't include nuance in what I'm trying to say. I can't. It's just because it has to go through several processes in my brain rather than just letting the communication come out. And for our friends who are autistic, that speech is not their natural way. We're trying to make them go through several steps to get out the word or communicate in a way that we understand best. Now, I'm not saying that that's a bad or a wrong thing, but it is very helpful for a parent, for a caregiver, for a teacher to understand that while that is what we want for our children so that they can communicate more effectively, advocate for themselves throughout the world, that we also want to come from a place of understanding that our child is having to translate, so to say, several times to get it to meet your communication needs and their communication needs, having those come together, which is quite complicated. And continuing on, so we covered OT, speech therapy. Another one is ABA therapy, or Applied Behavioral Analysis Behavior. Applied Behavioral Analysis. Yes. Now, ABA therapy has become quite controversial. There are many autistic adults who are, I hear them saying that ABA therapy has been traumatizing for them, and I believe their trauma. In my opinion, it's not up to us to say whether people's traumatic experiences are true or not true. For us, it's our job to believe them and to try to figure out how we can best help them and to prevent future generations from experiencing that same trauma. I will probably do a whole episode about ABA therapy. I have not chosen to put my children into ABA therapy. I will not say that the door is completely closed on ABA therapy. What people find controversial, and I'll very briefly go over it, is that the problematic history or origins of ABA therapy. It was created initially to eradicate autistic like, in air quotes, autistic like behavior or appearing autistic. In other words, just the very appearance of stimming, hand flapping, rocking back and forth, any of those things would be treated as if it were not good, something that is evil, not evil, but something that should be disciplined out of the child. They also, one technique that I wholeheartedly disagree with and find very trauma inducing is planned ignoring. And that means they often look at what is called the function of the behavior. Now, I am all for trying to determine the need is basically the same thing as the function of the behavior. In my opinion, it gives a more humanistic understanding when I say the need my child is trying to communicate through this behavior rather than the function of the behavior. The function of the behavior sounds quite robotic to me. Reactive, without feeling, without humanity, in my opinion. Others can absolutely disagree. And planned ignoring is when you have identified that the function of a behavior, so let's say screaming from a child, for example, is to get attention. Attention seeking is often the phrase that's used. And if the child is as a team, the ABA therapists have decided that that child is screaming, that undesirable communication behavior, to the function of behavior is attention seeking, then we are going to starve the behavior, is another phrase often used. Starving the behavior would means whatever they are seeking, we are going to withhold so that they understand that this method is not effective. Now, planned ignoring looks like if the child is in the room, turning toward the wall, not giving any eye contact, any acknowledgement of them whatsoever. If they come up and hit you, you ignore them. Complete ignoring. Now, here's the thing: if your goal is only to eradicate the behavior, it's effective. The child does learn that, in fact, that method is not effective. I believe. I liken it to instilling fear in a child or threatening physical punishment or spanking. Sure, it eradicates the behavior quite quickly because, again, you have starved the child of what they would want, which is connection. They would call that attention seeking. The more humanistic approach I try to take is what is the child expressing as far as a need. And once we have regulated the child, co-regulation, meaning they are in a fight or flight, fight, flight, freeze mode, how can we get them back into we're making decisions about this mode? And often they can't make decisions when they're in that fight, flight, freeze. So first, let's be regulated. Once you're regulated and we have put a bit of space between us and the event, enough space that it's not emotionally reactive, but not so much space that they can't recall the experience, then we readdress the situation and teach when they are in a teachable state what is more effective. Oh, you know what? I think you were hungry. Oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. Next time, you can say, you know what? Last time I was really upset. I ended up being hungry. Let me try a snack. Okay? Now, will that be effective right away? Probably not. Why? Because they're not motivated by threats of physical violence or emotional violence, in my opinion. And again, that's my opinion. They know that I'm going to be there for them, that I'm going to help them co-regulate, that we will work through this together, and that when they are ready, I will teach them a more effective way, that they don't have to resort to those means to get to what they would like, but that those feelings, maybe not the expression of them in that way, but those feelings are safe with me. Anyway, nice little diatribe. Um, so those are sort of the three main therapies. There's also CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. I highly recommend that. That can be a tricky, again, it's more cognitive, so it requires the individual who is receiving the therapy to be quite aware of one's emotions and self. So that can be quite tricky if you're talking about a younger child. But for a child in their teens or early tweens, or perhaps they're cognitively quite advanced, that could be an awesome option. Most therapists of adults use CBT. I have, sounds like I'm saying CBD, cognitive behavioral therapy. I have, when I went to a therapist in Seoul, Korea, I used cognitive behavioral therapy. I thought it was fantastic. Okay, so now that you have hopefully signed up for some therapy to help your child and help you gain some more training, more assistance, you maybe have a diagnosis, or maybe you don't, and you're continuing down a different pathway. Once you have a diagnosis, that diagnosis carries through the educational experience. And now we're on to the school process. How do you get your child in the school in the most appropriate way for your child? So let's say you already have an autism diagnosis in hand. You carry that diagnosis to your school. I would walk into the school with the diagnosis, let them know before the end of the previous school year. So for example, if your child will be attending fall of 2022, I would have brought my things in maybe April of 2022. And that's because the summer is spent for teacher preparing. They don't have hours that they are supposed to be on the clock, and they won't be holding meetings or anything like that. So if you want your child to attend school in a prepared way and have them have an IEP before they even arrive, then they need to be introduced to your child and aware of your situation. So again, March, April of the year before, the school year before, and then they'll be prepared for the school year. Now, they should be putting you in touch with the appropriate people as far as introducing you to what's called your case manager, which is the person who deals with the IEP, who types the things in, who organizes the meetings, who leads the meetings, who's overall responsible for tracking progress of your child. And then the rest of your team would include the classroom teacher and any other specialists that are involved. And there's always one member of admin that's required to be at one of those meetings. So that would be your IEP team, including yourself as the parent. And you can also include an advocate if you'd like, or close family friend is also allowed. You're allowed to record your meetings as long as you give at least 24-hour notice. In most states, I should say, you'd want to clarify and make sure that that was okay with your child's team. And they're usually pretty good about guiding you as to the next step. Now, I would just make sure, and I have learned to ask questions, to ask what the next step is and at what date, and to ask for it in writing. I know if you follow me on my other social media, you know, get everything in writing, or it's impossible to hold anyone accountable to dates that they have told you, or plans or promises that they have made, if it's not in an email or not in a text message, not in writing. So when you go into that first meeting, remember who it is that you talk to, get business cards, write follow-up emails. Thank you so much, Miss So-and-so. It was great to talk to you. Just to recap, we talked about Adam and his enrollment in your school and what that's going to look like. And you had mentioned that you were going to reach out to the IEP team, and it will look like this. When you don't hear back, when that date comes and goes, before the date comes and goes, you follow up. If you don't hear anything back within, a certain amount of time, you reply back and CC the person above the teacher, which would be the case manager. Above the case manager would be a member of admin. Above the admin would be the special education coordinator for the district. They sometimes have different names: special education administrator, coordinator, district manager, district coordinator, special education district something. Above that would be the superintendent. Above that would be members of the Board of Education. Above that, you start getting into folks in Washington, D.C. I hope that's helpful. And again, that's just the beginning processes. The school really should be helping you along in those processes, as long as you make known this is who we are, and this is us coming in. And we would like a meeting, and we would like things to be prepared for Adam when he goes into the school system, and making yourself known, making your kids' needs known. I hope that was helpful. I know it is a lot. Take it a day at a time, but please, as I said, get yourself on those wait lists, find answers, and demand answers, demand plans, demand dates, and things in writing from everyone you come into contact to.
I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Want to submit a question? Email us at theautismadvocatepodcast@gmail.com. Follow our social media outlets and check out our shop featuring my Autism Acceptance, Children's Illustrated books, and other fun autism acceptance items. Don't forget, I'm rooting for you, and we'll see you next time.